Hey friends, how y'all doing? What's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 5, Masechta Moed Katan. Friends, today's Daf, we explore irrigation canals. Yeah, like irrigation canals. And also being mitzayin hakvaris, right? Putting up signs around graves so that, if you're walking around with truma, so you don't be mitami the truma. So, friends, let's jump in. We are, I guess, technically all the way at the bottom of Daf Daled Amud Beis, pretty much the top of Daf Hey Amud Aleph. Umesaknin eskelkule amayim shebeshus harabim v'chule. We're already at the top line of Daf Hey Amud Aleph. That we can fix, right, the chachamim. So we saw yesterday the Maaseh, a machlokas between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and the chachamim. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that you're not allowed to create new water canals on Chol Moed or on Shemitah. The chacham said in Shemitah it's no problem to create these water canals, and on Chol Moed you could fix ones that are sort of broken or stuffed up. So it says the Gemara, Chatita in, Chafira lo. So when the Chacham say that you're allowed to fix the irrigation canals on Chol Moed, so that means to clear away debris, but to dig an irrigation canal, that would be no good. All right, what do you want me to tell you? Omer Reb Yaakov, Omer Reb Yochanan, Lo shanu ela she'ein rabim tzrichin loim, aval rabim tzrichin loim afilu chafira motor. And then Reb Yaakov says in the name of Reb Yochanan that when we say that what's allowed is removing debris, but digging is forbidden, that is only if the public does not need you to dig. But if the public needs you to dig, so then you can even dig. All right, fine. That sounds fun. V'chirabim tzrichin loim mi shari. But now, fact the Gemara. We're gonna have to go through this a shtickle slowly. It's not too complicated, but there's different sort of layers over here. But again, not too complicated. V'chirabim tzrichin loim mi shari. The Gemara wants to know. We just said that if the public needs you to dig an irrigation canal, you can dig an irrigation canal. But the Gemara wants to know, is that really true? In the event that the public needs you to dig an irrigation canal, can you? But we learn in the Brisa, so you're allowed to clear away pits, ditches, and caves of an individual. And then obviously you can clear away debris for the public need, right? If for an individual you can, and certainly for the public. And you're not allowed to dig the pits, ditches, and caves of the public, and certainly not an individual, and my love, bisharabim tzrichin loim. And we want to say that this brisa is talking about when the public needs you to dig a pit, ditch, or cave, and nonetheless we're saying that you're not allowed to dig. So lo b'she'ein rabim tzrichin loim. So the Gemara wants to say no, that brisa that says that you're not allowed to dig even for the public, that's talking about when the public doesn't need it right now. So therefore you're not allowed to dig. But then the Gemara says, let me ask you a question. The kavosa gabi yochid, we said in that brisa by an individual, she'ein yochid tzarich loim, and if we're going to be saying that it's talking about where an individual does not need it, chatitu mishari, would you be allowed to clear away debris? Meaning, that brisa has said two things. This brisa that we're analyzing right now said that when it comes to chatita, when it comes to clearing away debris, so that is permissible both by an individual and for the public. When it comes to digging, it's forbidden both for the public and for an individual. Now, the Gemara is trying to figure out what it's talking about. We wanted to suggest that it's talking about, well, basically what we just said now is that it's talking about where the public does not need this you to dig right now, and therefore that's why it says that you're not allowed to dig. But now the Gemara asks, so if we're talking about where we don't need it, and the public doesn't need it, therefore you're not allowed to dig this pit, ditch, cave. But then that must mean that also in the first part of the Brisa, when we say that you're allowed to clear away debris, both for an individual and for the public, then that must also be talking about when they don't have a need for it right now. But if that's the case, if they don't have a need for it, so then how can you be clearing away debris for an individual when there isn't even a need for it? But we learn in the Brisa that pits, ditches, and caves shel yochid of an individual, kontin mayim l'sochon, you're allowed to, gather water into it, aval lo chotetin, but you're not allowed to clear them away, to clear away debris. Velo shofin asidkein, you're not allowed to even out any splits, any cracks. V'shel rabim, and if it's for an individual, chotetin osen, you would be allowed to clear away debris, v'shofin asidkein, and to smooth out the cracks, and so what do we see? So we see in this brisa that when it comes to an individual, you're not allowed to clear away debris, right? It says, aval lo chotetin. For an individual, you would not be allowed to clear away debris. And mistama, that's talking about where you don't need it, right? Meaning, so here we have a brisa. Basically, we have two brises. One brise is saying that an individual is not allowed to clear away debris. The other brise is saying that an individual is allowed to clear away debris. Clearly, you must be talking about when is an individual not allowed to clear away debris? When he doesn't need it right now. He doesn't need to clear, he doesn't have an immediate need to clear away the debris. So therefore, he's not allowed to. So when it says that an individual is allowed to clear away debris, that must be talking about where he needs it. Now, going back to our brisa, we had a brisa that said that when it comes to clearing away debris, it's allowed for both an individual and for the community. And then when it comes to digging, you're not allowed to dig both for an individual and a community. We wanted to say it's talking about where you do not need it right now. But if that brisa is talking about where you do not need it right now, well then how could an individual clear away debris? I thought he's only allowed to clear away debris where he needs it right now. Because if he doesn't need it right now, we had that other brisa that says that he's not allowed to clear away the debris. So as I said, it's a little bit spaghetti, I guess you could say, but it's like not even that bad, but it's enough to like make you be like, what is going on? But basically there's like a few different moving pieces here. There's the individual, there's the public, and there's whether you need it right now, whether you don't need it right now. And ultimately the direction in which we're going is to say that by an individual, right, there's a difference between an individual and for the public, right? It's more stringent when it's for an individual than we are for the public. For the public, we're more lenient. So basically what we're getting at over here, and we're going to get there in a minute, but is that, so the most stringent thing is going to be when you have an individual who doesn't need the thing right now. So then you would not be allowed to clear away the debris in this water, if you have an individual who doesn't even need it right now. If he does need it right now, so then you can clear away debris, but you still can't dig. When it comes to the public, so then we're more lenient, and when they don't need it right now, you could still clear away debris, you just can't dig the ditch, and if they need it right now, you can even dig a ditch, right? So ve'elamai b'sheyochid tzarich loim. Okay, so going back to our brisa, where we say that you're allowed to clear away debris, you're not allowed to dig, so then that must be talking about where the individual needs to clear away the debris right now. And that's why it's saying that an individual is allowed to clear away the debris. But then dikavos gabe rabim b'shirabim tzurichin loim. But if we're saying that brisa is talking about where the individual needs it, and that's why he's allowed to clear away the debris, well then it must mean that also by the community, it's also talking about where they need to clear away, this waterway. But then chafira mi aser. But then, why would we be saying that digging is forbidden if we're talking about the community and they need it? We learn in a brayso when it comes to pits, ditches, and caves. Shal yachid konsen mayim l'sochon. If it's an individual, you're allowed to gather water into it. V'chotetin osan, and you can clear away debris. Avalo shofin es tzidkein, but you cannot smooth out the cracks. V'lo, I think there's a girsa change. Avalo chofrin osan, you can't dig. V'lo sudden osan besid, you can't put plaster in it. V'shal rabim, but if it's for the public, chofrin osan, you can even dig them. V'sudden osan basid, and apply plaster to them. And what's that talking about? When are you mamish allowed to dig in this pit, ditch, cave thing? So that is talking about when the public needs it right now. So elakasha ach kamaisa. But then if we're saying that the second part is talking about where the public doesn't need it right now, and that's where you're not allowed to dig. But if that's the case, well then, if you don't need it, then why does the Reisha say that an individual is allowed to clear away the debris? So Tritzachi, you have to answer it like this, and we're going to kind of wrap it up. Chotetin boris shel yachid b'sheyachid tzarich laim. When it comes to an individual, if the individual needs the ditch right now, so you can clear away debris. Ve'ein tzarich lomer b'shel rabim, kisherabim tzrichin laim. And obviously, when it comes to the public, if they need to use this pit, ditch, cave right now, you'd be allowed to clear away debris. Ta'afilu chafira mutter. Because if in that case where the public needed the pit, ditch, cave, well then you'd even be allowed to dig. And if the public does not need this pit, ditch, cave right now, well then you would not be allowed to dig. And certainly if an individual does not need this pit, ditch, cave right now, you would not be allowed to dig. Because if, after all, we're talking about where the individual does not need it, so then he wouldn't even be allowed to clear away debris. So again, basically we have 4 different categories. We have when an individual does not need this pit, ditch, cave right now, so then he's not even allowed to clear away debris. If he does need it, so then he's allowed to clear away debris, but that's it, he can't dig. When it comes to the public, if they do not need it right now, you can clear away debris but not dig. If they need it right now, you can even dig. Alright, sounds like very interesting stuff. Ravashi says, Ravashi masnisa namideka. We can also infer this from our Mishnah, that if the public needs to dig, let the public dig. The Katani osin kol tzorkei rab, as the Mishnah says, you can do all of the things required by the community. Kol la'asuyei mai, what is that coming to include? Lav la'asuyei chafira, isn't that coming to include digging? That if they need to dig, they can dig? Lo, no, la'asuyei hadatanya, it's coming to include the following things. Yotzin lekabetz es adrachim, that on Chol Moed you can go out to remove thorns from the paths, from the traveling paths, with the sakinis archovis, and to fix the streets, vesa istros, and the vesa istartos, and the market streets, v'lamud esa mikvos, and to measure the mikvos, v'chol mikvah shein bo'arboim soya, magilin l'socha arboim soya, and if you find a mikvah that doesn't have 40 sa, i.e. it's not kosher, so then you can add the requisite amount of water so that it will become kosher. And how do I know that if they didn't go out and do these things and make sure that there's no thorns on the road and that the mikvahs have water, etc.? So if you have, they didn't remove the thorns and stuff from the roads and people are getting hurt by the thorns, so how do you know that in that case the blood is on their hands, that they should have removed these thorns? Tamaloma, as the pasuk says, Vaya alecha domim, that it will be upon you blood. So therefore we see that you can go out on Chol Moed even to remove these thorns and things. But the Gemara says, 1 second. How could Kol Tzor Kerabim be coming to include these things like clearing away thorns and stuff from roads? The Mishnah had already said that. That you could fix up the roads, v'sarchovos in the streets, v'samikvos and the mikvahs, v'osun Kol Tzor Kerabim lasuyimai. If that's the case, then what do we learn out? From all of the needs of the community, right? The Mishnah had said a few things. That you can go out and fix the roads and the mikvahs and stuff. So we already know all these things. So what are we learning out from? That you can do Kol Tzor Kerabim. So lav lasui chafira shma mino. So it must mean that it's coming to include digging. That if the public needs you to dig a pit, ditch, cave, so you can do that. All right, that was really interesting. And you can make signs on graves so that people know that it's tamei and they won't go there with truma. Amr Reb Shimon ben Pazi says, Reb Shimon ben Pazi, Remez l'tzion kvaros min haTorah minayin. Where do we have an allusion to marking graves in the Torah? Tamaloma, as the pasuk says in Yeshaya, I believe. No, in Yechezkel, v'etzem adam uvana etzel tzion. Right, that you're going to see the bone of a fellow and you're going to make next to it a marker. Amr Ravina Lavashi says, Ravina to Ravashi, Amikami delesi Yechezkel man Amr. So 1 second, Yechezkel's a mamish gavalt, but he's a navi. He came later on. What about until Yechezkel? How did they know that you had to make signs by corpses? With a taimich. So now says Ravashi to Ravina, according to that logic, then Hadamar of Chizda, that which of Chizda says, Moshe benu lo lamanu. We don't learn the following from the Torah of Moses. Medivri Yechezkel ben Buzi lamanu. We learn out from Yechezkel. What do we learn out? Kol ben nechar oral lev v'oral basar lo yavo el mikdashi. That the pasuk says in Yechezkel that any fellow who has a thick heart or is uncircumcised, lo yavo el mikdashi, he can't come to serve in the temple. Well, how did you know this halacha before Yechezkel? It's a pasuk in Yechezkel. What about before Yechezkel? How did you know that these people were unable to serve in the temple? Rather, it's halacha l'Moshe miSinai. It's been there from Mount Sinai. Where am I? And came Yechezkel, and then he made a pasuk for that which we already knew from halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Right? So meaning, Yechezkel isn't telling us anything new because this was halacha even before Yechezkel. But the point is that Yechezkel just made a pasuk for it. So Achanami here as well, when it comes to making a sign, a marker by a grave, Gemara Gemire Love also Yechezkel Vasimcha Akra. Yeah, we already knew it from before. It was halacha l'Moshe miSinai that you put up markers on graves. But Yechezkel came and he made a pasuk for it. Rabbi Bo says that we learn out this halacha from the following pasuk: V'tomi tomi yikra, that by a fellow who has leprosy, so we call out, impure fellow over here, impure fellow over here, tuma kora lo v'omeris lo prosh. And the drush over here is that the tuma, the impurity, calls out and says stay away, i.e. put up a marker there so that you know to stay away from the tuma sames. V'chein amar Rav Uziel bar de Rav Uziel Rabbo, and so says Rav Uziel, the grandson of Rav Uziel Rabbo, tuma kora lo v'omeris lo prosh, that the impurity calls out and says, hey, stay away. But 1 second, the Gemara says, wait a minute. Tomi Yikra is not teaching us that you have to make a sign by impurity. No, Tomi Yikra is teaching us the following. V'Tomi Yikra sorich lo diatzayru l'rabim v'rabim v'akshin olav rachmim. That you walk around and say, Tame dude, over here. Everybody, look what I found. Tame fellow, over here. Why? So you have to let all the people know, and everyone then is going to pray for this fellow. They're going to make WhatsApp Tillim groups, and there's going to be a big Atzeres Tefillah. What's it called? I don't know. Whatever they write on the Pashkevils. Maybe they'll make a Pashkevil for you. It'll be very nice. So that's what we learn out from V'Tamei Tamei Yikra. That, they say, look, Tamei fell over here, so people are going to see him pray. So Imkein Lichtov Rachmana V'Tamei Yikra. If that was the only thing to learn out from it, it could just say that there's a Tamei fellow over here. How come it says it twice? So my V'Tamei Tamei Shmasmina Taite. How come it says Tamei twice? And we learn out two things from it. That the people should pray, but also that you should stay away from tumah. You should put a marker by impurity, by a dead body. Abaye says that we learn out from the following pasuk: do not put a stumbling block in front of a blind fellow, i.e., if we know that there's a corpse somewhere, so just put up a sign so nobody, accidentally becomes tummy. Rav Papa Amar solu panu darech. Rav Papa says from the pasuk, it says, hey, create space. Rav Chinna Amar arimu michshol miderech ami. Rav Chinna says, if you continue reading that pasuk, it says, remove a stumbling block from the ways of my people. So again, make sure that if there's impurity, mark it. Rav Yoshua Breder Rav Idi Amar v'odaitem lohem es haderech yelchuba. The pasuk says, and you'll let the people know the way that they should travel. So again, if there's tumah, let the people know. Marzutra Amar says, Marzutra v'zartem es b'nei Yisrael mitumasum, that you'll separate the Yidden from their tumah. Again, staying away from tumah. Rav Ashi Amar ushmartem es mishmarti, also mishmeres le mishmarti, says Rav Ashi, that the pasuk says ushmartem es mishmarti, you will guard my guarding, make an extra guarding for mishmarti, for my guarding, and that's talking about, it's a reference to truma, that it says mishmeres trumosai. So so therefore again, as a precaution against making truma tamei, so make sure to put up a marker around any tumas hames. Ravina Amar says, Ravina v'som darich arenu b'yesha elokim, that somebody who places, I guess, maybe a sign on the way, so then he's going to see the salvation of God. That sounds nice. I feel like I want to see the salvation of God. That sounds awesome. The salvation of God. Very spiritual. Amr Yeshua ben Levi says, Yeshua ben Levi, Kol Hasham or Chosav Zochav Rabbi Yeshua Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu. Wow. Somebody who evaluates his ways, he merits to see the salvation of God. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, V'sam darech atikri v'sam ele v'sham. Somebody who places his way, it doesn't mean to place, it means to evaluate. V'sham derech arenu b'yesha elokim. That a fellow who evaluates his ways, so then he'll see the salvation of God. Wow. Sounds very nice. Rabbi Yanai Avalei, how Talmida, Rabbi Yanai had a certain student, and this student would always ask Rabbi Yanai very difficult questions. And yet, on the Shabbos, by the festival, where there are a lot of people there, and there were a lot of people there, and if this fellow would ask a difficult question, and Rabbi Yanai wouldn't know the answer, it could potentially be embarrassing for Rabbi Yanai. So came that Shabbos, when there was the big shir, this student would not ask his questions. Just out of respect for Rabbi Yanai, he wouldn't ask his questions. And Rabbi Yanai says about this student that a fellow who basically, essentially evaluates his ways, so then I will let him see the salvation of God. Meaning that this student was being very sensitive, while in general he had a lot of questions and he would ask Rabbi Yanai the questions, but when there were a lot of other people around, and he didn't want to sort of create a situation where Rabbi Yanai could be uncomfortable if he doesn't know the answer, or just whatever, just stam. He didn't want to create a situation where he would be asking a question and stumping Rabbi Yanai in front of everybody. So he would kind of refrain and kind of show sensitivity, and therefore Rabbi Yanai applied the pasuk of a samdarcha and a b'yeshalokim, that basically somebody who evaluates his ways, so then I will show him the salvation of God. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ein mitzayin lo al kazayis min ames. Super interesting. We do not make a marker when there is just a kazayis, an egg's worth of a body. Of course, the halacha is that a kazayis min ames, kazayis basar min ames, a kazayis of flesh from a corpse is mitami ba'oil. It can make you tummy ba'oil. The Gemara is going to ask about this in a minute, but because we're saying ein mitzayin in lo al kazayis min ames, you do not make a sign if you have a kazayis from a corpse. V'al etzem kisora, and not on a bone the size of a barley kernel. A bone the size of a barley kernel, the halacha is that it's mitame b'maga umasa. It's mitame if you touch it, if you carry it, if you move it, but not ba'oil. If it's a bone the size of a barley kernel, if you're in a structure with it, a house with it, it will not make you tummy. Okay, flesh the size of an olive will. All right. And not in anything that is not mitami ba'oil. Meaning, if you have something that will not make you tummy tumas oil, so then you would not put up a sign, a marker for it. Meaning, if we flip it around to make it positive rather than double negative, the only time when we make a sign is by something that will be metame be'oil, because the point is, if you step over it, you're going to be making an oil over it, and then you'll become tummy. So, for example, if you step over a bone the size of a barley kernel, so it's not metame be'oil, so it's really not that big of a deal. But if you were if you're going to step over something that's going to be mitame ba'oil, so then by stepping over it, you're making an oil, and you're going to be, could potentially be mitame truma. So then we want to put up a sign. Okay. Aval mitzayin al ashedra vala gulgoles. We do make signs if there is a spine, the bones of a spine, because bones of a spine, even though it's not the entire body, it will be mitame ba'oil. Vala gulgoles, or on a skull, al rov binyan, if you have sort of, even if it's not necessarily the majority of quantity of bones, but it's enough to be the majority of the body, you have like the bigger bones. So Val Rov Minyan, or even if you don't have necessarily the bigger bones, but you have lots of smaller ones to the extent that it's more than half of the bones of the body. Val Rov Minyan Ames. So then if those are mitami ba'ol, so then you would put up a sign. And we don't put up signs when it's like obvious and clear that there's like a dead body there and that it's going to be mitami tumas oil. But when you're not sure if it's a suffix, so then you do put up a sign. Okay, I'm sorry, I skipped. And the following are the definition of these sfekas, of these what was it called? There's did I just define sfeikos somehow? I feel like maybe uncertain. Yeah, uncertain, I guess. Sfeikos. And what are these uncertain situations? So schachos, sufros, vesapras. Schachos and pros we'll explain in a few minutes, and a base hapras. Okay. I guess we'll explain that in a few minutes as well. But basically, it's a field where there's kind of a suffix of tuma over there, so you would put up a sign. Now, you don't put up the marker like literally over the tuma, because you're only going to notice the sign once it's too late, once you're already stepping over the tuma. So therefore you want it to be a little bit, outside of the range of the tuma, so that you'll notice the sign before you actually step over it. But nonetheless, we do not make the marker too far away from the tuma, because we don't want to be sort of losing Eretz Yisrael, right? Meaning if you make the marker too far away, because basically that the part that you're marking, you're not going to be walking over there. You're basically marking it like off limits, and therefore we don't want to be taking like large parts of Eretz Yisrael that are off limits. So therefore, on the one end, we don't put the marker right over the Tumah, because then you might only notice it when it's too late. So you have to move it a little bit far away from the, a little bit of a distance from the Tumah, but not too far away, because then, you're going to take too much land away from use, since nobody's going to be able to walk there, since it's tummy. So now, Frek the Gemara, a very interesting kasha. So 1 second. We had said earlier that if you have something that is not mitami ba'oil, that it's not going to make something tummy in an oil amaze, so if that's the case, then we don't put up a sign. And we had said that we don't put up a sign by a kazayis min amaze, by an olive's worth of the meat of a corpse. So now, but 1 second, so does that mean that an olive's worth of a corpse is not mitami ba'ol? Because if it was mitami ba'ol, then you would put up a sign. But we're saying that you don't put up a sign. We learn in the Mishnah, the following make impurity in a tent. Kazayis min amaze, a kazayis of a mace. So it's clear that a olive's worth of a corpse does make a tumas oil. So if that's the case, so then shouldn't we put up a sign? So listen to this answer. Amar Papa says, Papa, here we're talking about exactly the size of an olive. This sof mechaser chaser. That ultimately, this size of an olive is going to decompose and become smaller. And therefore, ultimately, while, maybe immediately when it's buried in the ground, it's going to be the size of an olive and it will be mitame. But ultimately, over time, it's going to shrink. It's going to get smaller. And it will no longer be the size of an olive. And therefore, it will no longer impart tumas ha'oil. Mutav yisarfu olav truma v'kachim l'fisha v'al yisarfu olav la'olam. Wow, I love that. That it's better, meaning better to risk that right now, when this olive, meat the size of an olive is buried in the ground, but somebody might walk over it with truma, and it'll become tameh, and it'll be a mess. Sure. But the alternative is that we put up a sign, and that sign is there forever. While it's really only necessary for the short term, but then you're going to have some sign there forever, because at one point somebody once buried kazayis b'sar mace into the ground, and at that point in time it would have imparted tumah, so they put up a sign, and now forever there's a sign there that says that nobody could walk over it because there's tumah, even though it's really not true anymore. It's only true for a brief moment in time. So therefore, what the Gemara says, look, honestly, we'd prefer to take the risk right now and avoid having to put up a sign that's going to really be there forever and really won't be relevant after the short term. I mean, that's gold, right? It's like straight up like a UX kind of like grappling with like UX, right? Like, how do you approach solving a problem? I don't know, like, do you like put up like more kind of walls, or do you try to like, I don't know, create a situation that is more, I don't know, like you have this problem over here, right? You have this k'sayis b'sar mace, and you're concerned about like being matami truma. So one approach is just to be like, well, let's just put up a sign. But then you like put up more signs. Now you have like signs forever, even though they're not necessarily relevant. I don't know. You want to like kind of come up with a solution that's going to sort of be the most supportive as opposed to more restrictive. And that's what the Gemara is doing over here. It's saying, look, we don't want to put up a sign that's just always going to be restrictive for all eternity, even though it may not be necessarily. I don't know. I guess that they were sort of balancing the needs over here, and they determined that, let's like not put up the sign when it's exactly the size of kazayis. Anyways, I don't know. I thought it was super interesting, just in terms of like, I don't know, and like not putting up like walls, not making things restrictive, trying to make things more sort of inclusive and usable as opposed to unusable. Okay, now these are the suffix. All right, schacho sufros. Okay, what are these suffixes you have to put up signs around? So schachos, like awnings, canopies, and praos, what are these things? So schachos ilan ameisach ala aretz. So schachos is, for example, if you have a tree with like, a bunch of different branches, and under one branch there is a mace, which means that, underneath that branch is tumas oil, but you don't know which branch it is. So you got to make a sign over there, because we don't know which branch it is, so you got to make a sign around the tree. Pros, avonim pros, hayotzis min hagoder. Okay, and these stones are stones that are like sticking out of like a fence or something. And I guess also like it could create an ohel, and there's a mace. All right, so you put up a sign around it. Beis hapras. So what exactly is the situation of a beis hapras that is not mitami ba'oel, and you what is the situation of a beis hapras that is a suffix, and therefore we do put up a sign, okay? And we said that in order to put up a sign, it would have to be mitame, right? Mitame ba'ol. Katan, as we learned in the Mishnah, hachorish is a kever. If a fellow plows a grave, right? So let's say you have a field, and in the field there's a grave, and then you plow the field. So now you don't know where the grave is. So areu ose beis hapras. So by doing so, he creates a beis hapras. V'chamahu ose, and how much does he make a beis hapras? Umelo meine mea ama. Okay, I guess for 100, for an area of 100 amos, you have to be concerned that maybe there's a part of a dead body there. All right, but then frekte gemara uveis hapras mitami ba'ol. Is a beis hapras actually mitami ba'ol? Let's go weiter. V'amar Yehuda amar Shmuel, but it says of Yehuda amar Shmuel, minapeach adam beis hapras v'holech. That if a fellow gets the beis hapras, he can just kind of blow away and then keep on walking. Let's go weiter for a second. Rav Yehuda bar Ami mishmei de'ula amar, says Rav Yehuda bar Ami, the name of Ula, beis hapras shenidash tahor. That if you have a beis hapras that was like well traveled, well trampled, so then it's permitted. Meaning, what's a beis hapras? Beis hapras is you had a mace in a field, and then you plowed the field, and now there might be like a small bone the size of a barley kernel in the field, and if you move it, if you like step on it and you move it, so then you'll become tameh. Now and what are some of the suggestions that we just read? Let's read that again. Amar Shmuel says, in the name of Shmuel, if a fellow, needs to make sure that he's not going to become tameh, that he's going to remain pure, he's going to remain tahor, and he gets the beis hapras, what do you do? So what you can do is you can just kind of like blow on the ground, clear away the ground, make sure that there's no, barley kernel sized bones there, and then you can walk through this beis hapras, no problemo. Rav Yehuda bar Ami mishmei de'ula amar beis hapras shenidash tahor. As long as it's like well, trampled on, so it's tahor. You don't have to worry about becoming tummy in there. Now, if we're concerned about tumas ha'ohel, well then what is stepping on trampling on the field have to do with anything? Or what does blowing away barley kernel sized bones have to do with anything? I mean, if there's like tumas ha'ohel, so then meaning the point of blowing away the barley sized kernel thing was that so that you won't end up stepping on a small little bone and becoming tamei for tumas hesed. But if we have to be concerned about tumas ha'ohel, well then if you walk over like a dead body or something, you're going to become tamei, and therefore you wouldn't be able to walk through this beis hapras even if you like blow away the ground and make sure there's no barley kernels or whatever of bones. And therefore, from the fact that we're saying that there are ways that you're allowed to walk through a beis hapras, clearly we're not concerned with tumas ha'ohel. And if we're not concerned about tumas ha'ohel, then we shouldn't be putting up any signs, because we said that we only put up a sign when we're actually concerned about tumas ha'ohel. So Amar Papa says Rav Papa, Lo kasha kam b'soda she'ovad bo kever, kam b'soda she'nechosh bo kever. So it depends. Was there a corpse that was lost, misplaced in the field? or was there a body that was plowed in a field? If the body was plowed in the field, so then that's not metame tumas ha'oil. Right there, the concern is that there might be a small bone the size of a barley kernel, and you like step on it and move it and become tummy tumas hesit. And there you could walk through the field as long as you've made sure that there's no, small little bones. But when we say that you have to put up a sign by a beis hapras because we're concerned about tumas ha'oil, that's talking about a field where a dead body got lost in the field. So somewhere in the field there is a dead body that if you walk over it, you will be tummy tumas ha'oil. And in that case, there's tumas ha'oil, and you would put up a sign there, and you would not be allowed to walk through it. Fine. Shenechosh ba'kever beis hapras karile. Now, fact the Gemara. Now, if you have a field that a corpse was plowed in it, is it called a beis hapras? Yes, it is called a beis hapras. As we learned in the Mishnah, shlosha beis hapras hein. There are 3 types of beis hapras. Soda shenevad ba'kever, a field that a corpse got lost in it, so it's tamei tumas ha'oil. Soda shenechosh ba'kever, you have a field that a corpse was plowed through in it, and therefore there you have to be concerned about tumas heset. V'sod v'stei bochen, as well as the stei bochen. My stei bochen. What's a stei bochen? Rabbi Yoshua bar Abba Mishmei Ula Omar says, Rabbi Yoshua bar Abba in the name of Ula, Soda shemaftirin ba'mesim. It's talking about a field that they sort of leave from dead bodies there. That basically, I guess sometimes if they would like take a body, a corpse, from one place to another place, I don't know, from city A to city B to be buried in city B, so you'd have people transport the body from city A to city B, and then people from city B would then take over. And sometimes, I guess, they weren't careful, and a limb would get lost or something. So that's that. The time of my, how come Amar Vimi Mishum Yeush Bailim, because Naguba, because the different groups of people handling the corpse might not be paying so much attention, and they might lose like a limb here or there, and therefore you have to be concerned about tumah in these places. So one second, if you have a field that a corpse, a grave was plowed through in it, so we say you don't have to worry about tumas ha'oil, you have to worry about tumas hesed. So, and we said that if that's the case, since there's no tumas ha'oil, so you don't have to put up a sign. But v'atani, we learn in the Brisa, matzah sadam mitzuyenes, if a fellow found a field that had a sign around it, ven yadua mativa, and he doesn't know what's the deal with this field. Yesh ba'ilonis, b'yadua shenechosh ba'kever, if there are trees in the field, so then you can assume that the field was plowed through for the trees, right? You have to plow the field for the trees, and therefore it's a beis hapras that a corpse was plowed through in it. Ein ba'ilanus, if there are no trees, so then b'yadua she'avad ba'kever. Well then, since there are no trees, it wasn't plowed, and therefore that is where a grave got lost in it, not plowed through. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda ad she'esham zokin utamid lefi she'ena kol b'kiim b'davar. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not enough just to see if there are trees there. You actually have to ask an elder or a student, somebody you can rely upon, to let you know if there is a dead body that's lost in there or a dead body that's been plowed through in there. Papa says, so what's the question? The question is that it says that you're coming across a field that has a sign on it, and we're also saying that it's possible that it could be a field that a corpse has been plowed through in it, right? We said if there are trees, then you can assume that a corpse has been plowed through. But if a corpse has been plowed in it, so then why is there a marker? I thought there are only markers when there's tumas ha'oil, not tumas hesed. So Amar Papa says, Papa Kitanya, that Bryce is talking about hayi besada she'avad ba kever. It was talking about a field that a corpse got lost, vitzienua, and they put up a sign because it's talking there's tumas ha'oil, corpse got lost in there. But yesh ba'ilanos, if after that point you come to the field and you see that there are trees, biyadua shenechosh ba'kever. So then it must mean that since then there are trees and they plowed the field. Meaning at the time that they put up the sign, there was a corpse that was lost in there. but then after that, they plowed the field on account of the trees, and therefore they put up the sign for a field that there was a corpse that was lost in it. But ultimately, the field got plowed. And if there are no trees, so then it's just a field that a grave got lost in it. But one second, just because there are trees, why can you assume that there is a that it's been plowed and we're talking about tumas hesed, not tumas ha'ol? What if like it's a field and the trees are in the middle of the field, and maybe the corpse? So maybe you plowed the area by the tree, but the corpse is outside of the area of the trees, and maybe it's a corpse was lost in it, not just plowed. So, right, let's be concerned that maybe the trees are inside and the area by the trees have been plowed, but the corpse is outside of the perimeter of the trees, and therefore there actually is a corpse that's been lost in there. And you have to be concerned about tumas ha'ol, because Amar Ula, it's like Ula be'omdin ala gvulin. It's talking about where the trees are on the perimeter. Hachanami be'omdin ala gvulin. It's talking about where the trees are on the perimeter. Therefore, it can't be that the corpse is on the outside, because the outside would be Rishus HaRabim, and the corpse wouldn't be in Rishus HaRabim. It's got to be inside, and therefore the field was plowed. But still, if you have the trees on the perimeter, so maybe the area by the trees was plowed, but the area inside was not plowed, and that's where there's a corpse. So and it's talking about where there are lots of trees, and therefore, it's all kind of intertwined, and therefore you're going to be plowing the whole thing. By same, if you want to say, and we said, we also said that we do not make the marker far away from the tumah, because we said we don't want to have swaths of Eretz Yisrael that are inaccessible because of Safek Tumah. So therefore, if you have a sign and it's right by the entrance to the field and there are trees there, so then you can assume that is where the corpse is, and if there are trees, then you can assume that the area has been plowed. Friends, that was daf hey of Masechta Moed Katan. I guess kind of a technical daf. I mean, we were talking about kind of clearing away and digging irrigation canals. We had distinctions between an individual and a community. An individual, if he does not need it right now, so he cannot even clear away debris. If he needs it right now, he can clear away debris. When it comes to the community, even if they don't need it right now, you could still clear away debris, but you cannot dig. And if they need it right now, you can even dig if it's for the community. And then we talked about making signs by graves, that if there's tumah, so you want to make a sign in that area where the grave is, so that you do not walk there with like truma and make things tameh. We had said that an interesting halacha, that while we don't want to put the sign right on top of the tumah, because then you might only notice it when it's too late, but we also don't want to distance the sign too far away, so we're not like making parts of parts of Eretz Yisrael, too much of Eretz Yisrael off limits because of Tumah. And we also had said that if it's exactly Kazayis, even though Kazayis has been Tami Ba'oel, but we're not going to put up a sign, because ultimately that Kazayis is going to shrink, and we don't want to put up a sign there that's going to be there forever, even though we only really need it for the short term. We then said that we only put up a sign around Tumah when it is going to be Tami Ba'oel, when it's going to some Tumah that will be transmitted in a structure. But if it wouldn't be Tami Ba'oel, then you don't need to then you don't put up a sign. And we described 3 different types of what's called a base apras. A base apras is where there is a place where there's a corpse, but you don't know where it is. So either because the corpse got lost in a field, or because the field got plowed through. The difference being, if the corpse got lost, so then you have to be concerned about tumas ha'ol, because what if you step over the corpse? If it's talking about a field that was plowed, so then you can assume that there isn't a full, you won't be matami ba'ol because the corpse has been broken up, but you still have to be concerned about, you might move, step on a bone and move it and be matami tumas hesed. There was also another example which was called a stei bochin, which is basically when they would transport a corpse, and then you would have like 2 teams, one bringing it from the first city to the next, the other one taking it from there, and sometimes I guess limbs will get lost, so you have to be concerned about tumah in that field. Friends, that was daf hey Masechta Moed Katan. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.